Hey,
How are you?
I'm so good. I think I've been like a kid in a candy shop waiting for Layne, and I you don't even realize how excited I am to talk to you and how much you've impacted my life.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm happy to be on. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, Layne, tell us who you are, what you do, what you're passionate about, what you're crazy about, whatever you want to tell us about.
Yeah, so I guess when I try to describe to people me, it would either be one of two. I'm a meathead who loves science, or I'm a nerd who loves lifting weights. So whichever six of one, half dozen of the other that you prefer. I got into lifting weights when I was young, about 15 years old, because I was bullied pretty badly when I was younger and didn't really get attention from girls. So I thought if I lifted weights, that would help with that. It didn't help with either of those two things, but it did help me improve some confidence. And I just fell in love with lifting weights. And that kind of led into, I've always been a pretty competitive person. I played baseball in high school. And when that was over, kind of was looking for a competitive outlet to get into. And that became bodybuilding for me. And then as I got into bodybuilding and kind of, anybody who's ever walked by the supermarket aisle at the store sees that, use this diet, use that diet. No, this diet's the best. No, that diet's the best. No, this diet.
Come on
even,
now.
even in the same magazine, they'll contradict themselves. So, I decided, well, I don't really like having all these questions. So I'm going to do more education. So I did an undergraduate in biochemistry. And then while I was doing that, was still into competing, and then decided I wanted to go do a PhD in nutritional sciences. So I did that. Along the way of doing my PhD in nutritional sciences, I did pretty well competitively in bodybuilding,
Yeah, you
became
did.
a professional drug-free bodybuilder, and then also a pro powerlifter, kind of the other side of that weightlifting coin, if you will. And then while I was in graduate school, I was writing articles for bodybuilding.com as well as a few other websites, including my own, and kind of got popular doing that, and did a video series for bodybuilding.com that was very popular. And that led people to coming to me saying, hey, can you coach me, or can you help me with this? And me just kind of taking that up as, a demand. This is back before Instagram, when not everybody who had a six-pack was a fitness coach.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got into that, and, actually really became kind of was in that first wave of legitimate online coaches. And started that up around 2005, 2006. So I've been doing that for 15 years. Did that for a long period of time, coached people who were very successful. I think when I went through my client folders last time, I had 1,700 client folders. So 1,700 plus clients. And then more recently have moved away from kind of the one-on-one coaching, not because I didn't enjoy it, but because it is limited in what you can do. And I really want to try and make a big impact. So now we have a team of coaches who we've trained. So we still offer the coaching through our company. And then we've written several, my wife and I have written several books.
Amazing books.
For those who don't know, my wife, Holly, she's bad. She's awesome. She's got a master of dietetics. She's very smart and is also a competitor. So we've written several books, including Fat Loss Forever, The Reverse Dieting Guide. And then we've also just recently come out with a nutritional coaching app called Carb and Smart Diet Coach, which is doing incredibly well.
Yes.
So kind of trying to come up with ways to reach every demographic we can, as well as, providing price points that are reasonable for anybody. In fact, we just put on a completely 100% free seminar this past weekend, a webinar that I thought, we'll just do this little webinar with our coaches. And and the guy who was helping me organize it, our marketer, came to me and said, you are a victim of your own success. He said, we have 7,000 people signed up for this webinar. So we actually had to upgrade our Zoom so much that it was pretty expensive for us.
Yeah, 7,000 people.
But it went incredibly well, and obviously got a lot of people aware of the brand and whatnot. And I'm sure we'll make that money back in other ways. So just trying to, we realized a lot of people have been struggling through this, the quarantines and then some people have lost their jobs. And, obviously just because you lose a job or you have financial hardship doesn't mean that your goals just stop. Right. So we wanted to be able to find a way to, help people and give them that opportunity. So, we had people saying, wow, I would have paid $300 for this seminar, that kind of stuff.
Little webinar, 6 hours of genius.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was like a 2-day event.
It was very involved, but we all had a lot of fun. And I think what the coolest part is it's fun. I'll never sit here and tell people I don't care about money. Of course I do. Like I'm a human being and I like to make money, but more about the money represents that I've done a good job for people because there's a lot of people in the fitness industry who pander, who make up BS. And, I can honestly say I've never lied or distorted the truth in order to make money. And it's probably cost me money in the short term, but so I know that the dollars I make or the dollars that we make were earned, and it's because we're serving people well. Yeah. And when we see, like when I write a book and it does really well, or we do an app and it does really well, that's like the most rewarding, or a webinar, it does well, and see people's feedback. That's the most rewarding thing because it's like you provide something, you work really hard at it, and then people love it. And then that's just kind of the best kind of feedback.
Absolutely. And what better way to have good fortune with Goodwill? I mean, like, what better way is there? Like, make a hell of a lot of money. Impact a hell of a lot of people. You always say, I didn't know what to think about all this stuff, so I just decided to figure this shit out on my own. And it's like, then help us all, because we've been trying to figure it out and it makes no sense.
Yeah, and I think that's, for people who follow me online, for those that don't, because I think this is a little bit different group than I might normally speak to. For those who don't follow me, I've kind of been known as the no bullshit,
that's it,
BS buster in the fitness industry. I just don't tolerate it. I don't tolerate people who make up nonsense.
Yes.
And part of that, some people have called me arrogant because of how emphatically I will go after, people who make up this stuff. And I said, you're reading me wrong. This comes from a place of love because I understand how vulnerable the average consumer is, because you're playing on people's emotions and their their insecurities with their own body. And I just have a just extreme level of disgust with people who, use that sort of insecurity to sell. I won't do it. I never have. I won't. And we even saw, just the in ways I love the fitness industry, but I also hate the fitness industry. We saw this when COVID came, just anybody who just had any kind of immoral compass, we'll call it. So all of a sudden they're selling immunity boosting protocols and immunity boosting supplements and this and that. And I could not have been more disgusted with that sort of thing, just taking advantage of people's, fear. Yeah. And so that's something where I tell people, I'm like, this isn't coming from a place of arrogance. This is coming from a place of compassion, because I have coached and met and talked to so many people who have literally been in tears with how frustrated they are on this journey, feeling like they've been lied to so much. And so that's kind of the paradigm that I operate from and that we operate from is we want to provide good value doing that in an ethical way. And also, I don't believe in, I'm not a well-learned economics person, but I also understand that, money isn't like a pie. It's not like you take money from one, it's taking it from somebody else. It's much more complicated than that. In fact, people who earn more money tend to generate more money because they can employ people and those people can make more money and that sort of thing. Right. But I do have a kind of feeling of like, all right, we have a responsibility to get as big of a piece of this pie as we can, because if we have more of this pie, we can reach more people, and it's more likely that they're not going to be influenced by some of these sleazy scumbags who are going to steal their money and sell them lies.
So good. And you know what? It's something that being driven by that disgust with being someone, I mean, I look at you, I've been following you and watching your videos since 2008, 2009.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and come from a background of competing in my 20s and different things like that. This isn't really about my story, but seeing that frustration when you're looking for real answers, especially if you're looking for real answers that your doctor didn't have, or it doesn't make sense, or your physiology is not like what they talked about in that book. Or if you have variable things coming into play, like gut health or autoimmune or age or whatever, or destroying your body from steroids and years of competing or years of no carbs, and having that frustration and being a light, literally, and being, I've done all the research, let me help you. Will you speak into that, I heard you say that sustainable caloric deficit isn't one size fits all, just like our physiology isn't one size fits all, and your life isn't my life, and age isn't even a real big key in everything. Will you speak into that? Especially, I'd say 65-70% of my audience are women between 35 and 50. And we've got some great men in business and stuff like that, but everybody's looking for that. How can I feel better? How can I have more energy? How can I sleep better? And I go and read all these different things and think, oh my God, now I have a migraine from all this information. Yeah. How do I get rid of my migraine?
Sure.
Help us with that.
Yeah. So I'm going to go into a little bit of my background, and I'm going to bring this around so that I'm not just some abstract scientist in a lab coat who doesn't know anything about this stuff. So
let me say this too. One of the biggest reasons I love you and Holly and your mission is because you're not just gym rats. You're not just people who work out intensely. I mean, I like to work out too, but you're scientific.
Yeah.
So you're not guessing while you're working out. So from that perspective, I want everybody to hear what you're about to say, because it really changes the paradigm of receiving the information you have.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is so if we back up, everyone likes to feel special, or that they have a special case, and then that sort of thing. And I kind of came from the background of thinking, all right, if I do all this research, I'm going to come up with some groundbreaking, difference in physiology, or some diet is going to emerge, or some, and I was really disappointed. Didn't
find it.
Yeah, the research, it was just really, and I think one of the things that happened to me is from having my hypotheses crushed so many times over the years was actually a good thing for me. Yeah. Now, when anybody makes claims, if somebody makes a claim, my first thought that goes through my head is, wonder if that's bullshit. That's where I start from. I try to go from a place of trying to disprove everything, and then if it withstands that test, then I can be very confident about how robust it is, right? So going back to, economics to relate to your audience a little bit more in business. So we have a lot of people, it's the same thing. So people say, you'll hear what works in business? Well, the things you don't want to hear are, it's going to be really hard. It's going to take 10 times as long as you want it to.
Suck.
You're going to be so frustrated that you're going to want to quit. And every day it's going to be stressful. It's all these sort of things. But if you keep plowing along, and obviously you need to have a good plan as well. But if you keep plowing along and you follow certain principles, your chances of success are much more likely. Now, what gets the headlines? 3 easy ways to make 6 figures from home while working 4 hours a week.
Step by step.
Yeah, get out of here. Get out of here. Now, are there people that stumble into that and get lucky? Yes. But that's like winning the lottery. That's not what typically works, right?
The lottery might be easier.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. I take this weekend course on flipping houses for no money down and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. No work while you sleep.
Don't you guys really think if it was that easy that just everybody would be doing it? So when it comes to nutrition, it's very much similar, right? Mm-hmm. So what people don't want to hear, and this is what I spelled out kind of very in painful detail in my book, Fat Loss Forever, is that there is no magic diet. There is no magic program. Weight loss specifically keeping weight off, if that's your goal, is very difficult. And the statistics are really scary if you look at that. But there are ways to do it, but it boils down a lot more to behavior than it does X's and O's on what you do with your diet. Because those of you out there, if you've done a diet before, why did that diet fail? Did it fail because you didn't have the perfect amount of protein in your diet, or because you ate after a certain point, or because you ate before this hour or after this hour, or you had carbs? No. We can find, like, people, for example, low carb is very popular right now.
Right.
Let's just people say, well, you can't lose weight if you're eating carbs. You got to cut carbs. We know that's not true because we can find millions of examples of people who lost weight eating a diet containing carbohydrates. So we know that's not true. It's just not. Now,
vegan is super high in carbs.
What's that?
Vegan is super high in carbs.
Sure. And we see plenty of people who lose weight and get healthy on a vegan diet. We also see people who lose weight and get healthy on a low carb diet. So certainly that is a tool, right? And so bringing this back to what actually makes a difference for weight loss and health. Well, if you actually examine the scientific literature, so first off, no matter what anybody says, calories matter, okay? Now, I'm going to break down calories in versus calories out because this is very misconstrued by a lot of people. A lot of people, I hear things like, well, I tracked calories and I didn't lose weight. Okay, well, that's like saying I put together a budget and I didn't save money. Well, you can have a budget, but if you're not actually doing anything with it, you're not going to save money, right? So tracking calories is simply referring to monitoring the situation. You're not making, any kind of intervention. Now, I've also had people say, well, I ate in a calorie deficit and I didn't lose weight. No, you didn't. If you didn't lose weight, you didn't eat in a calorie deficit. Now, you may have eaten in what you thought was a calorie deficit or what a calorie calculator online told you was a calorie deficit, but it wasn't if you didn't lose weight. And I mean over the long period of time. Like if you didn't lose weight in a week, that means nothing because your weight can fluctuate a lot.
Correct.
But I'm gonna go into this a little bit more. The other thing is people don't realize is that calories in versus calories out are not independent variables. So how many calories you eat also affects how many calories you burn. So for example, if you overfeed somebody, they will actually burn more calories per day. Now, if you're overfeeding, you're always going to end up storing more than you're burning, right? But let's look at it from a financial perspective. People, let's say somebody was, when they were in their early careers, making $50,000 a year, and they were living on that. Now, 20 years later, they're making $2 million a year. Are they still living on the same budget as they were when they were taking in 50,000? Probably not. Probably not. They probably loosened up the reins on that because they can afford to be a little bit more inefficient with their money because they have a bigger budget.
Right.
That is exactly the same thing that happens with your metabolism.
So good.
If you are eating more calories, your body can be less efficient with those calories. By the same token, if that millionaire loses their job and all of a sudden is relegated to, $100,000 a year job, it's by a lot of people's standards, that's still a really good income, but they're going to have to change their lifestyle because they're going to have tighter constraints on their budget if they want to be able to still make progress.
Right.
Calories in, calories out is the same way. If you diet, if you're in a fat loss phase, your metabolic rate will reduce. Now, it won't reduce as much as the calories you reduce necessarily. So this idea that there's a starvation mode where you're eating so little that you're storing fat, that doesn't exist. We only need to go look at concentration camp victims to see that is absolute nonsense because those people did not get fat. They actually starved to death, right? Yeah. So we know that's not true. But what does happen is those people who eat in a calorie deficit over a long period of time or who are fasting or starved, they do have a much slower metabolic rate than what you would predict based on the amount of body mass that they have, which means that your body, if you are somebody who diets on and off for a long period of time, you may have a lower energy expenditure than you predict. So bringing this back, I eat the calorie deficit and lose weight. Well, if you're somebody who has a long history of dieting, what you have told your body from an evolutionary perspective, if you're thinking about it from the body, food is scarce, food is scarce, food is scarce. So we need to be as efficient as possible with these calories we do take in. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is it's also the way people kind of weight cycle and calorie cycle. So a lot of people will be, what happens, right? People start a new diet, they're real gung-ho, it's January 1st, Monday, whatever, and they're gung-ho for a few weeks, and then they have a party they go to and they kind of blow out, and then that parlays into the next day because the party was Friday night. They wake up the next day, they don't feel so good about themselves, they feel like they've kind of blown it. Well, I might as well let myself have what I want this weekend, whatever. And then you kind of get in this thing where there's always an excuse to sort of have that sort of thing come up, right? And people tend to lose weight slowly and put it back on quickly. That's kind of how it goes. And when you're doing that, you're also not undoing those metabolic adaptations that occur that are slowing down your metabolic rate. Those take time to undo, just like they take time to implement. So I don't want to scare people out there to make it seem like, oh, if you go into calorie deficit, tomorrow your metabolism's already slower. That's not how it works. But if you put on weight very quickly, it's not like, like let's say it took you, 4 weeks and you lost 10 pounds, right? But you put that 10 pounds back on in a week. It's not like you undo all those adaptations over 4 weeks in just 1 week just because you put all the weight back on.
No.
So I think part of that is how people cycle calories. Now, getting into what can we actually do about this? What actually works, right? Well, if you look at the scientific literature, because about 90 to 95% of people fail a diet if we look at failure as, okay, they lost weight, but they didn't keep it off, right?
Yeah.
And if we look at that over a long period of time, like 3-4 years.
Right.
So who are the 5 to 10% who actually do keep it off? Because there are people who do keep it off. So what do they have in common? Well, one of the major things they have in common, the top two things are self-monitoring and cognitive restraint. So when it comes to self-monitoring, it means people, and again, I'm not saying this has to be every single person who does this, but on the whole, on average, these are the things they do. You can find exceptions for every rule, but these are the things they do as a group.
Right.
That is, they weigh themselves pretty frequently, because what happens, right? You have a bad night eating out, whatever. I don't want to jump on the scale tomorrow. I don't want to see, we kind of hide our heads in the sand, whatever. But if you hop on that scale and you see you're up 3 pounds, you go, oh, we need to pull it back in a little bit, right?
I need to drink more water in the bathroom.
Right. So there's that. It's kind of that feedback mechanism. They also tend to practice some form of cognitive restraint. Now that can be counting calories. That could be, reducing carbohydrate intake. That could be eating only whole foods. But it's some form of restraint. So the problem with a lot of people is they want the results without the restraint, right? They want to go, well, how can I eat what I want, however much of what I want, whenever I want?
Yeah. And
that's just not going to work, right? So you can eat. So if you want to eat the foods you want to eat, you're going to have to limit how much of them you eat. If you want to not limit how much you eat, you're going to have to limit the foods you eat, right? So what I mean by that is if some people will say, well, I went on a ketogenic diet or a plant-based diet and I ate more and I lost weight. Well, you may have felt like you were eating more because it was more satisfying, but I can promise you that you were eating less calories. Yes. I can promise you that.
Yes.
So there's those. They exercise regularly. That's a huge portion of it. So exercise alone isn't a powerful weight loss tool, but there's a lot of research to suggest that people who exercise have better sensitivity to satiety signals, meaning their brain is wired better to tell them, hey, you're full when they eat. So for example, there was a study in the 1950s where they looked at Bengali workers, and they looked at people who were sedentary, lightly active, moderately active, and heavily active. And from lightly active to heavily active, they pretty much linearly increased their calorie intake to match their activity level. And these are people that weren't even monitoring. This was just intuitively.
Right.
What's funny is the sedentary people ate more than the lightly active and moderately active group. Wow. So being sedentary actually kind of appears to unwire some of the things in our brain that help us deal with satiety and fullness. So I tell people exercise is important because it's going to give you better tools to help manage everything. And plus, it's honestly one of the most, like, you could lose 0 weight, and if you start exercising, you will become healthier.
Plus, you feel like crap when you're trying to exercise, and you just ate 2 bags of potato chips. You just get tired of feeling like crap at the gym.
Right. So there's that. There's also other things. People who lose weight and keep it off, they tend to not snack very much. So snacking is actually one of the biggest. I'm not saying you can't have snacks, but the problem is a lot of people unmindfully snack. They just grab handfuls of stuff. So one of the other powerful statistics is out there is looking at underreporting. So when you look at how many calories people actually consume versus how much they say they consume, it's massively different. About 50% if you're talking about overweight or obese people. So they brought people in, they actually had people come into a metabolic ward who self-identified as people who had trouble losing weight on low calories.
Right.
And the first thing they did was they actually tracked how much they ate versus how much they reported. And in most cases, it was a 50% difference.
Like controlled portion size and everything.
Right. So now the problem with this is that feels like a personal attack, right? That feels like somebody who might be in that situation would feel they're saying I'm lying. But that's not necessarily true. I don't think most people lie. I think most people eat unmindfully. We don't count licks, bites, snacks. Some people don't track.
Handful of nuts versus 17.
Handful of nuts. 300 calories. Handful of nuts, 300 calories. A healthy snack. We also have, you're baking and you take little licks and bites of whatever you're cooking, right? That half-eaten candy bar. Well, that didn't count. And then I see people also who are trying to diet, who kind of try to hack their way around things. I don't count my vegetables. Well, okay, but then they also don't count a full pack of sugar-free gum, because calories. Well, yes, it does. So when you start accumulating these things throughout the course of the day, you see drastic differences in how much you report it. And the other thing is, people, unless you've had the experience of weighing out what you eat and looking at what serving sizes actually are, I understand how people would underreport. In fact, I'm surprised it's not more, because if you ever want to be depressed, go look at a serving size of nuts or peanut butter or cereal or ice cream, for the love of God.
300 calories.
Yeah.
2 bites.
I want to see who actually eats a serving of ice cream. You know what I mean? Like one serving. The most people, I will tell you, most of you out there who have never kind of tracked your calories, if you're eating a bowl of ice cream, you're having 4 servings of ice cream.
Yeah.
So people say, well, the ice cream said it was 150 calories for that much.
Yeah.
Who had 600, right? Yeah. So I think that part of that is an education thing where people just don't realize what's in food. And then also, just to give you an idea, it's not a personal attack, because dietitians underreport. Dietitians underreport by over 200 calories a day in studies. So in another study, they took people who also identified as, I have a slow metabolism, I can't lose weight. They took them in, they put them on 1,500 calories, and almost every single person lost weight. Wow. So when it's controlled, when it actually is what you say it is, people do lose weight. So calories in, calories out, well, coming back to that, it matters. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of people say, well, I don't understand. There's got to be one diet. What about the ketogenic diet? What about this and that? So to date, we have over 30 studies now that have measured either fat loss or energy expenditure, looking at protein and calories equated. It's important to equate protein.
Yes.
It's important to equate protein because protein has a higher, what we call thermic effective food. So protein actually increases your energy expenditure. So protein is actually probably a really good tool for weight loss for 3 reasons. 1, it increases energy expenditure. 2, it helps you maintain your lean body mass, which is important for maintaining your metabolic rate. And 3, protein is very satisfying. Most people, try eating 600 calories from chicken breast and let me know how you go, right? Now try eating 600 calories from ice cream and that's a breeze, right? So I'm not saying you should go out and eat 600 calories from chicken breast, but I'm making the point. So when we look at, if we look at carbohydrates versus fats in the diet and look at these studies, The research shows virtually no difference in terms of fat loss or energy expenditure, which is actually a wonderful thing because that means you can do what you prefer, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm getting back to is people want to feel special. They want to feel like maybe they have a special case or their physiology is different. And we hear people say, well, this diet didn't work for me, but the ketogenic diet worked for me. And my physiology must be different. No. What is more likely is this is the diet that tripped your, what I call compliance algorithm. That this was the diet that for whatever reason you found easiest to stick to. Okay?
Yeah.
And when we look at the health benefits of diets, this is what the statistic that actually blows people's minds. There was a meta-analysis done back in 2014. Now, meta-analysis, for those who are not familiar with the term, means they basically look at every study in existence, and they look at, okay, we want to narrow things down and ask a specific question.
Right.
Now, which studies that are out there in the universe currently address this question? And they have what's called inclusion criteria.
Right.
So, like, for example, this study looked at, okay, we want calories equated, protein equated, and we want to see differences in health markers between carbohydrates and fats being varied, right? So they found, I think it was like, I want to say over 50 studies. So they combine, what they do is they combine all that data, right? They combine all that data and they look at, okay, what does the overall consensus of the data say? Because individual studies are prone to bias, they're
Right.
prone to mishandling of data, they're prone to misinterpretation.
Right.
But when you have 50 combined together, now you have a much more robust data set to deal with. I think it was like over 20,000 subjects in total. What they found was 95 to 99% of the health benefits, the health improvements from diets could be completely explained by the weight loss. So, which means the conclusion we can draw is the best diet for you as an individual is probably the one you can stick to, right? So people get all, I had a gal who messaged me, she was obese, she was 400 pounds, and she said, I'm just so confused. I started the ketogenic diet, this and that. And so I talked to her and I said, well, let me ask you this. Could you see yourself eating the ketogenic diet 2 years from now? She said, no way. I said, okay, well then I think we need to take a step back and come up with a more sustainable plan for you. Because if you can't sustain that, the research says you're just going to put it back on, right? So that is where we need to start. We need to start with the problem is people lose weight on a specific diet and they become very enthusiastic about that diet, which is fine. It obviously worked for them. But then they kind of try to do mental gymnastics to justify why it's the best diet for everyone.
Yeah.
I've never understood this.
Like, to validate, maybe? I think that's part of it. I was a victim and now I'm not.
Right. And I think part of it's enthusiasm. They want to help other people, and I get it. But let's not do mental gymnastics. And I've said to people, I'm like, I just prefer this. Why is that not good enough? It should be good enough.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example. I do something called calorie cycling, meaning I have some days I have higher calories, some days I have lower calories, but I'm still looking at my weekly calorie budget, as it were, right? Yeah. People ask me, well, do you think that's better? And I said, no, there's no evidence that it's physiologically better. I just prefer it. I like knowing that I can have higher calories on my weekends, and I'm willing to forego a little bit lower calorie during the week in order to have that, so I can have some alcoholic beverages. Oh, by the way, a lot of people don't track their calories from alcohol.
That's like, what?
Another thing people are mind blown out is a lot of people don't track their calories on weekends. They say, oh, I eat 1,500 calories. And then they don't realize that they're eating 3,500 on Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. And they're not losing weight. They wonder why. Well, you're not eating 1,500 calories. You're actually eating 1,800 calories per day on average. So that's why you're not losing weight.
Oh, good. So you're in Donut Friday.
Exactly. So these are a lot of the things that are out there. So I think getting back to the original question, I realize a very long answer.
Oh, no, it's great. I'm loving it. I'm learning.
Yeah, so getting back to the original question, I think that we all like to feel enthusiastic about our diet, that sort of thing. But find what works for you in terms of what feels the easiest. So what some people have said that. They've said, I did the ketogenic diet. It didn't even feel like I was dieting. It just felt easy. Great. That's probably a great option for you. Other people have done the ketogenic diet and said, I couldn't stand it. It was the worst, 6 weeks of my life. I felt terrible. I felt so deprived. Well, that's not going to be a good option for you, right? No. Other people have said the same thing about a vegan diet. Oh, I felt so satisfied. It was so filling. Great. But if you're like eating a vegan or a plant-based diet and you're eating, plant-based Oreos and a bunch of processed food, you're kind of missing the point of it, Yeah. When I want to address that too. When I say processed food, people want to get bent out of shape about this too. There's nothing about the processing itself that makes that food terrible. It's just very calorie dense. Mm-hmm. And the research shows that the reason people add weight when they eat processed food is because they just eat more calories. People have tried to scapegoat individual nutrients. It's sugar, it's carbs, it's fats, it's this, it's that. And when you start looking at the research data, you're going to be really underwhelmed when you look at it. I mean, even like sugar, which everybody knows is the worst thing in the world for you. Well, there was a study done a while back that looked at 100 grams of sugar intake per day versus 10, and had people in a calorie deficit. And guess what? Both groups lost the exact same amount of fat because they were on the exact same amount of calories. Mm-hmm. Now, am I saying you should eat a lot of sugar? No. I think eating a lot of sugar is probably a bad idea because it's not very filling. But you get people go too far in one direction. They go, oh, well, sugar is probably bad, so I'm not going to eat fruit. Here's what you're never going to hear from. I have never in all my 20 years of doing this heard, oh, I can't stop eating apples. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like they're so tasty. I just can't stop eating them.
I binged on strawberries last night, and I feel the runs, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I like apples. I think they taste good, but you have one or two of them, and you're good. But you have a slice of apple pie, you could have 5 more. Like it's not sugar or fat or salt. It's all of those things combined together that makes food hyper palatable. And that's like people say, well, I'm addicted to sugar, but they tell you they can't stop eating cookies and cakes and this. Well, you're actually getting just as many calories from fat in those. So are you really addicted to sugar, or is it you're just addicted to hyper palatable foods, right? Yeah. So,
or the rush.
What's that?
Or the rush that comes with the sugar.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to do this. Again, where I came from and what the approach that I kind of started advocating for was flexible dieting, which now I've kind of backed off being so outspoken for it because I do think there are people that it's probably not appropriate for. But basically, I track my calories and my protein and my carbs and my fats. And as long as I meet those and my fiber goals, get enough micronutrients in, as long as I meet those, I don't really care what foods I get them from. And that's, people are saying, well, you can't be healthy and do that. I said, well, check out all my blood markers. I'm very healthy. Yeah. People don't realize that unhealthiness is an overall lifestyle. If you're somebody who's training hard 2 hours a day and, you're controlling your calories and you don't smoke and you don't drink or you don't drink too much and all this, and you limit your stress, you get enough sleep, but you have 70 grams of sugar per day. Are you really unhealthy? No, you're fine. But most people, those variables aren't isolated. Most people, if they don't exercise, they're also less likely to monitor their calories. They're more likely to smoke. They're more likely to drink. All that stuff kind of goes together typically. So you got to look at the overall lifestyle that people go through. But what I would implore people is, try out different diet methodologies and find what feels easiest for you. Like, for example, intermittent fasting. That's another one. Some people say, I'm not hungry in the morning, so I don't eat till – my wife's like that. My wife doesn't eat her first meal till around noon or 1 usually. Now, what happens is people lose weight doing that, and they go, see, fasting is magic because it boosts your metabolism and does this. No, it doesn't. Actually, fasting, if anything, your metabolic rate drops during the fasting period, which is fine. That's normal. But it is a tool to limit your calorie consumption. Now, you may feel like it's easier and you may feel like you're eating more because, hey, you're not eating for 16 or 18 hours. So you're able to eat more in a shorter period of time, which makes you feel more satisfied. But it doesn't work for everybody, and not everybody feels that way. And I think, if we could just have more honest discourse about why diets work.
Yeah.
And it does, you may not, like I always say, you may not count calories, and you can lose weight not counting calories, but
right.
Calories always count, no matter whether or not you count them or not.
That's so good. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a few like rapid fire questions. Some that I've experienced, some that I know people have asked me. I have no intention of becoming an expert on all of this, even though I've had a huge transformation, which is why I love bringing people like you to really answer some of the hard questions, because what worked for me might not work for somebody.
Sure.
One of the questions that comes in a lot, because I battle Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
And so getting back into the gym 6 days a week, weaning off of 140 milligrams of Oxycontin and 90 milligrams of Prednisone, that was never abused. My body just was tolerant and there was pain.
Yeah.
There's a healing that had to happen to my adrenals and my thyroid, because all those medications just hamper the best way for me to burn calories. So, again, it's not so much about my story, but I've had a lot of people have interest in that, especially women in their 40s or 50s. And I'm wondering, what would you say as far as like the best way to eat? Like, I've studied a lot of what you've said about refeeding and stuff like that, gone from just 30 carbs a day to being able to go even up to 200, still be able to see abs and feel great. What would you say though when someone is tracking their hormones, their thyroid's off, or they find all these different things are off, and they're or if they're not, you know what I mean? Like if you're doing all the right thing, but your gut is a mess, or you're doing all these things, but your estrogen and testosterone or whatever, whether you're male or female, is off, or like me, you're weaning off of something, so your body has to readapt. Have you coached with people like that, or what would be some of the scientific? Because I love your scientific approach. This is not a how I feel or what works for me. It's scientific why it works for me.
Yeah, so I think specifically with like prednisone, for example. So prednisone, one of the problems is it causes massive water retention. Anecdotal reports say anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds of water retention can be normal. So that's one thing that's problematic. So you're not even dealing with fat gain, but just a lot of water gain. You also have, I think, prednisone also increases hunger. So you may be, whether you realize it or not, eating more calories throughout the day and not realizing it, and you don't feel very good on it. So typically, what happens is, again, people think this means it lowers my metabolism. I haven't seen evidence that it lowers metabolism, but if you don't feel good, you don't move as much. Now, people hear that and they think, well, he's talking about exercise. Not necessarily. No. When I say move, a large portion, up to about 25 to 30% of the calories you burn during the day are just from, like me just moving back and forth in my chair here, like you're nodding your head.
I have to keep moving.
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually it's called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and it's actually a large portion of what we burn throughout the day. And there's actually research to show that people that we call fast metabolisms or obese resistant when they overfeed, they actually just increase their NEAT by quite a bit. And people who aren't obese resistant or obese prone actually tend to not increase their small movements throughout the day. So if you ever met anybody who fidgets a lot, usually you might notice that they tend to be lean. You don't really meet very many obese people who fidget a lot. So that's part of it. So that may be one thing, right? As far as hormones go that affect, so here's the straw man argument some people make with me. They're like, well, your calories in, calories out neglects hormones. That's actually not true, because if a hormone has an effect on weight loss or weight gain, it does so through modifications of either calories in or calories out. So, for example, when we look at thyroid hormone, and people with hypothyroidism, there's evidence that hypothyroidism can lead to approximately a 25% suppression of your basal metabolic rate. So your basal metabolic rate isn't your total daily energy expenditure. Those are two different things. But your BMR is about 60% of the daily calories you burn. So if you're impeding that by, a fourth, that could be 15, around 15% of the daily calories you burn, a drop in that, right? So instead of burning 2,000 a day, maybe you're burning 1,700. That could be the difference between losing weight and gaining weight, or losing weight, not losing, or not losing weight and losing weight.
Right.
So that's part of it. Now, what I will say, and some people will probably get mad at me for saying this, is a lot of people claim they have hormonal issues and they don't actually go get them measured. Now, that's a different issue entirely.
Yeah.
If you think you have something hormonal going on, go and get them measured. But some people don't want to do that, and I'll tell you why. It's the same people don't want to do a budget. It's because they don't want to see what's happening. Because God forbid it actually be a problem that they're eating too much or spending too much, right? So I think that's part. By the way, I've been guilty of that when it comes to budgeting. When I was not doing well financially. So just putting a certain level of empathy there. And this is not coming from a place of judgment. It's coming from a place of
no. I've done both. I've done where I haven't had anything checked, and for the last 3 years, it's checked every quarter.
Right. So, and I think that's important. If you think there's something going on, absolutely important to get it checked.
Yeah,
but I had a friend of mine who she's Kuwaiti, and she actually helped me organize some seminars in Kuwait. Very smart woman. She's a PhD, but she was finding herself gaining weight when she started a certain medication, and I don't want to disclose it, but when we kind of went over her numbers, and we got down to, we were even down to, well, are you? Because I trusted her that she was telling me what she was consuming and how much weight she had gained. And I said, well, could it be possible that you're eating at night, like sleep eating, and not realizing it? So we actually even put up a camera in her kitchen to make sure that wasn't the case. Well, what she went back and did was she actually tracked her step counts from her old data. She'd never looked at it. And she found that she was just moving way less when she was on that old medication. And when she got off of it, without even realizing it, she started moving more. Wow. And she actually told me a story. She's like, yeah, I was so weak and felt so tired that I couldn't even break open a bag of chips. I had to get a pair of scissors out to open a bag of chips. She's like, so it makes sense that I put on 20 pounds because I just wasn't moving. So I think that's something people should keep in mind as well. Like, is it your metabolism slow, or are you just subconsciously, not consciously, because people say, well, I go to the gym for an hour. I still do. Okay, but subconsciously the rest of the day, are you moving less? And that's why I think a step counter is actually helpful, because it kind of, you go, oh, wow. I've seen it with clients. We had a client with Team BioLane who started her diet. Within 2 weeks of starting her diet, her steps went from 8,000 a day average to 4,300. So it's important. Now, so again, it's if a hormone has an effect on your weight, it's either through energy expenditure or it's through eating more, right? And it's not, you're not making something from nothing, right? Like same thing with finances. If you're saving more money, it's either you're making more money or spending less money, or a combination of both. Money is not just appearing in your bank account out of thin air. That's now, Uncle Sam didn't come in and say, hey, sorry about that. We actually felt like you worked really hard, so we're going to give you more money. Just here you go. Here's 10 grand. Like that. That doesn't happen. So that's what I would say is, like, make sure that your hormones that you're actually having them checked. And if there is a problem, then you can get that. You can get a prescription and you can get that fixed, right? And they showed that people who supplement with thyroid hormone, who have hypothyroidism, if they normalize that thyroid hormone levels, it normalizes their metabolic rate. So it is something that's a fixable problem. But if it's, if you get those checked and you're not seeing any problems or anything like that, it's more likely that something, if you're not feeling good, it makes sense. If you're not feeling good, maybe you're just moving less. And it could be that simple. Now, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's a simple fix, because if you feel bad, that still means you feel bad, right?
I don't want to move.
Right. So you may need to eat less calories. And when I say that, people get, well, I'm already eating 1,800 calories a day. Well, maybe for you, that's too much, right? So so again, it comes across as the verbiage people use, like, right? So, and that's one of the things about energy balance that offends people. Calories in, calories out. What they hear is you're eating too much.
Yeah.
But they already perceive a high level of effort. So it comes to them as a place of judgment, which is why I say, again, telling somebody eat more, move less is about as helpful as telling somebody, well, spend less.
Yeah.
Right? Make more money and spend less. Thanks for the tip, right? This is why I actually
I'm already tapped out.
right. I actually I read Dave Ramsey's book years ago, and I actually really liked it because it felt like kind of my advice for finances. It was, because let me give you a specific example. He talks about why he recommends people pay the smallest debt off first and not the one with the highest interest rate. And he says, because if we were doing math, we wouldn't be having this much debt already, right? But it's not a math issue, it's a behavior issue. So I'm trying to fix the behavior, which is, okay, if we pay off this one, we feel like we get a win and we do the debt snowball, whatever. I approach, fitness the same way. This isn't a math problem.
No.
We know what we need to do.
Yeah.
It's a behavior problem. So trying to rewire somebody from bad behaviors, that's where we need to start. And I think people, I get it. It's hard to take responsibility for where we are. And of course, yes, I just talked about it. Obese people are more likely to fidget less subconsciously. They're more likely to have a high level of reward from food compared to somebody who is lean. Like my wife always jokes. She's like, "Thank God my wife is a foodie. She's like, "Thank God I'm active because if
I can't wait to have her on here."
Yeah, she's like, "Thank God I'm active because if I wasn't, I'd be 500 pounds." Yeah. So my wife is very active. I never see her sit still. She actually has a treadmill at her desk, like one of those standing treadmills to work from, because she's a foodie. She gets a high level of I just look at the way she looks at food, and I wish she would look at me that way. I know that Layne, it's sorry, honey, I'm just kidding. She's in the other room. I'm sure she can hear me. But I always joke that it's, pictures of food, cats, food, Layne, pictures of food, cats, food, So, but she has said this. She's like, I wish I was like, she looks at me, she's like, you don't give a shit about food. I'm like, no, I like food, but it's not like I'm not thinking about, for hours what I'm going to make for dinner. That's not, but some people that's really they get a really high level of reward from food. So just looking at an obese person and saying, oh, you're fat, lazy, this and that, it's not, that may be partially true. Part of it could be laziness, but also it's important to have empathy because just, berating somebody is not going to help them. Right. No, and also I came across a study, very interesting. They found that they surveyed 100 obese women, and they found that 60 of them had been sexually assaulted during their lives. Mm-hmm. And some of them, when they interviewed them, said, I got big so that people wouldn't touch me, or that, people, so that I would feel like I could defend myself, just being bigger, that I was that I would be more intimidating to a man, that sort of thing. So again, yes, the nuts and bolts are eat more or eat, whoops. The nuts and bolts are eat less, move more.
Right.
But I think the emphasis needs to be on what habits can we make to achieve that, because just telling people that is not really it's not really super helpful.
No. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. And I'm just purely selfish and asking this for myself. Most of this is all for me. I just get to share it.
Go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to come from the perspective that I don't have an understanding of what I'm going to ask you about. And it's just peptides have had a great deal of effect in my life as far as reversing autoimmune condition and healing the gut and stuff like that. But I also know the same kind of thing exists there. I've had people say things like thymosin alpha and thymosin beta might be great. And there are things that can make your whole body hurt. It's just, that's your physiology, and being willing to say, this doesn't work for me. Where something low dose on one realm, you might need a higher dose on the other. first of all, I'd love your brief thing on how you feel about peptides, and it's actually a fascinating study to me. But I'm definitely not an expert, so I'm really intrigued on your findings if you have any on peptides and stuff. The other thing is, do you think that people don't exercise that right in their own life to say, hey, this isn't working? This doesn't work for me, even though you're paying this hormone specialist or doctor or somebody who specializes in stem cells or whatever, and it doesn't work. It's the same kind of thing with business or diet or finance. I mean, do you think that sometimes people pull back because they hired the expert and then they feel like a failure if it didn't work, as opposed to maybe it's your physiology?
I think that experts fail us more than our physiology fails the experts, if that makes sense. I think also most people, I have been unimpressed with a lot of doctors and medical professionals who provide nutritional advice or, hormone therapies and that sort of thing. I'm not saying they're all bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that on the whole, when somebody comes to me and says, well, I saw this, like a naturopath, or I saw a hormone specialist, or I saw this, my first thought is, oh boy. Now again, I have had people who have provided good recommendations that I have seen. So I don't want to pigeonhole those groups of people. But one of the things that I thought was kind of a really interesting, this is kind of a little bit broader, but I'll bring it back to what we're talking about. Somebody said, I just don't know who to trust, right? Like there's so many opinions out there, and this person has credentials and this person has that. It's a really big problem, because as humans, we're pretty good at, like, when you talk to somebody for a while, for a little bit, you usually know pretty quickly whether or not they know more than you on a subject, right? Mm-hmm. So if you sit down with somebody, like, within a reasonable amount of time, you'll know, like, kind of where you stand compared to them. What we are really terrible at doing is, of two people who have more knowledge than us about a subject, which is the more knowledgeable of the two? Mm-hmm. We're really bad at deciphering that. Mm-hmm. So that's how people were able to create confusion, because if you're looking at two people who know more than you argue, you can't even decide who's winning that argument, because you don't even have the wherewithal to be able to examine their claims. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the big problems. So people say, well, the wherewithal to say it's not working for me. I think that here's part of it. When people choose an approach, whether it's dietary or stem cells or whatever it is, and I've looked at some of the literature on stem cells because I considered it for my hip years ago, and I decided against it because it was really, I just wasn't that impressed with the literature. Mm-hmm. It seemed about 50-50. And 50-50 could just be random chance. So again, maybe it does do something. I could be wrong, but
so many different ways to do it. It's like,
right. And that goes to a larger, broader argument of actually placebo, and I'll talk about that here in a minute because that'll blow people's minds.
Yeah, well,
I think when people so they go to a doctor who's known for doing a certain method, or they go here who does a certain method, people don't typically go there with the open-mindedness of, okay, this might not work, so I'll try it. They go in there already kind of having bought in, right? For people are usually, even people who are not frugal, we're actually usually pretty stingy with our money. Like our data shows that it's about 12 contacts before somebody even purchases anything we have. So somebody could come to my page, be like, wow, PhD nutrition, this and that, whatever. But they're not going to buy my stuff. Not for a while. Not until they trust me, right? Yeah. So by the time we go to somebody, usually we already trust them. Now, the one caveat to that is if somebody you trust recommends that person, you are much more likely to trust them, and it bypasses everything, right? So that's why word of mouth is so powerful in the marketing world.
Right.
So that's why we have problems abandoning those methods, because we already attach the results to them because we believe that we're going to get those results. And that speaks to a larger thing about placebo as well. So I think this will blow some of your listeners' minds, just how powerful the power of suggestion is. So when people say, well, this thing worked for me, or I did this and this worked, that means nothing to me. Like when I say that, it means it means nothing to me in terms of, will I recommend this to other people on a broader level? I only use empirical data for that. And here's why. There was a recent study where they looked at caffeine. Okay. So we know that caffeine improves performance. There's a lot of data to show that. So they had 4 groups of people. They had one group of people, they were going to have them do exhaustive cycling on a bike.
Right.
One group did not get caffeine and were told they didn't get caffeine. One group didn't get caffeine, but were told they got it. One group got it, were told they didn't get it, and another group got it and were told they got it. Do you know that it did not matter whether or not they got caffeine? What matters is what the researchers told them.
I believe it.
So now people will hear that and they'll say, well, does that mean caffeine doesn't work? No. It just means that your beliefs about what caffeine does are much more powerful than what it actually does. Now I'm going to tell you another way more compelling study and story. There was a study done where they looked at ghrelin levels. It was part of a broader study, but the one thing I want to point out is ghrelin, because it'll make sense. So ghrelin is a hormone that makes you hungry, essentially. So they looked at people who they're based on their genetics, so their physiology actually being different, were either high or low secretors of ghrelin, right? So we would expect that high secretors.
How do you spell the ghrelin?
Ghrelin.
Okay.
So they looked at people who, based on their genetic code, essentially were either high secretors or low secretors of ghrelin. And then they randomly told them one or the other. So meaning you had people who had low ghrelin who were told they had high ghrelin, and people who had high ghrelin and were told they had low ghrelin, and people who had low ghrelin told they had low ghrelin, and people who had high ghrelin told they were high ghrelin. Do you know that not only did their subjective feelings of hunger change based on what they told them, their actual levels of ghrelin changed? So if they were low, if they had the genetics for low ghrelin secretion and they told them that they were high, their ghrelin went up.
Oh my God.
So their So we used to think that the brain was kind of like separate from this bag of meat, right? And the brain just controlled everything that went on in the bag of meat. And the only thing the bag of meat did was just send signals to the brain to tell it what's going on. Now we know that everything's integrated. The way you think can change your physiology.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that you can suddenly grow wings and become a bird and fly just because you believe you can. That's
insane.
But you can see significant changes in your physiology based on just the way you think. Also, your body also can change the way your brain works as well. So it goes both ways, right? We know the gut microbiota communicate with the brain as well. So be very careful conflating it worked for me as being actual evidence. And I'll give you one more example of that. So I hurt my back really badly a few years ago.
Right.
And I worked with a gentleman named Stu McGill, who's a renowned world expert in back pain. And I went through my recovery and whatnot. Now, McGill has some detractors, and some people say, well, some of this is nocebo or placebo or whatever. So I did his method and I got better. And people ask me about it.
I've watched squatting and deadlifting, like, holy crap.
Yeah, so I went from being not able to walk legitimately for a few days to this past year I deadlifted 727 pounds and squatted 666 pounds at nationals. So people ask me, well, maybe I should do that. It seemed like that really worked for you. And my response is always, maybe. I don't know, because I don't have a control group. Maybe I would have gotten better if I just had done nothing, right? So not only did I do those exercises he told me to do, but I also stopped lifting. I also stopped loading my spine for 6 months, right? So just to give you another example, back surgeries, okay? So when it comes to back surgeries, they find on the whole, actually, let me give you a better example, meniscus surgeries. So they did a study where they looked at outcomes over the long term with people who had a torn meniscus, whether they got it repaired or not repaired. So they looked at people who had either a surgery, the actual surgery, or a sham surgery. So a sham surgery is where they open you up, but they don't do anything, right?
Yeah.
And it was even so controlled that the surgeon didn't know whether or not he was doing the surgery until he walked into the operating room and got an envelope. And he opened the envelope and it told him, okay? Did you know they had no difference in outcomes? So what mattered was what they believed. So again, I'm not saying like if, for example, you tear your bicep and it retracts all the way up to your shoulder, you're not going to be able to be like, grow back and have it grow back. Like that's something that's got to be fixed.
Right.
But the human body is incredibly adaptable and very subject to the power of suggestion. So again, the thing I would take from people is be very careful about whose claims you believe.
Right.
People will say, well, drink this tea and you'll lose weight. And I did it and I did this. Well, maybe, right? Like the power of placebo, it doesn't mean people are lying. It just means that when you believe something, it is much more likely to work. So that's why I tell people I don't deal with feelings unless it's my personal life. Yeah. I don't deal with beliefs unless it's religion.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And I don't give a damn what worked for you in terms of what I recommend to other people. Now, if it worked for you, great. And I'm not saying don't do it because, hey, if you feel like it worked, fabulous. But
you said that if it's working for you, that's part of your success.
Right.
Because it's working for you.
Right. But I mean, at the same token, like again, and I don't know exactly kind of the finance stuff you do, but there are people who have gambled big with single stocks and done extremely well.
Yeah.
On the whole, that's a really poor investing model.
Very much.
You know what I mean? So people could say, well, you can do the same thing. You say, well, it worked for me. Okay. Well, we know for most people who don't get lucky and don't win the lottery, because that's what it is when you're playing single stocks, it's kind of the lottery. Yeah. We know that for the most part, it's having a diverse portfolio, investing in good mutual funds and that kind of stuff where you're maybe playing some single, if you've got enough overall wealth, playing some single stocks, but not, you don't want to be fully invested in that sort of thing. So that's kind of the same comparison I would make, right?
That's good though. Because like I'm playing with my E-Trade app this week. At the end of last week, I had lost like almost $700 on investing in airlines. Very small investment, like 10 grand. And yet I completely forgot about it, was super busy and logged in yesterday and found out I had made $1,100. So if I had logged out and went, this is horrible, I'm losing so much money, but I didn't wait just 5 more days. Yeah, I hear you.
Well, that's the thing with investing is if you're going to, this is away from the fitness thing, but if you're going to invest in single stocks, I've done it before, but it's more like I have this money. If I lose it all, it doesn't break me. Yes. I'm going to buy when it reaches a certain point as low. And when it reaches a certain point and high enough, I'll sell it. Otherwise I'm not going to touch it. Yeah. And it's the same thing if I ever go gamble, like I will gamble very rarely, but I'll just take like a certain amount of money in cash not that I don't care about, but that I say, if I double it, I leave. Yeah. If I lose it all, I leave. That's it. And I don't take my debit cards. I don't take anything like that. I just take that. Right. And so that's kind of the thing, but you don't want to make your whole, I think people with addictive personalities have problems going from one to the other and you kind of choose your addiction. But like if you start, let's say you did that single stock and you made $5,000 and you go, well, if I had invested $100,000 in this, I'd have, and it's like, but you change your, now here's where it goes back to diet. Yeah, but you change your behavior when that happens.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you've got so much of your wealth invested in this one thing and it starts dropping and you're more likely to do something stupid.
Yeah.
So same thing with diet, nutrition. Choose your tools. Don't, everything's tools in a tool belt. I don't poo-poo any one single methodology typically. Everything's tools in a tool belt. Find the kind of restriction that can work for you in terms of your individual psychology, which is probably actually more important than your physiology.
Yeah.
And what you can sustain. And that's the most important thing. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
This is so good. And you're really good at detoxing people from diet scams. You're the detox doctor.
Yeah, I'm the anti-detox doctor. Yeah, it is funny, but it's the same thing. People, we want to believe that there's a quick way to get to what we want, but it's kind of been to know, like having gone through a long career in lifting weights and seen just how hard it is to build muscle, to build strength, and how long it takes. I find that quite liberating, actually, because I know when I get into something, it's going to be much harder than I think it's going to be. And like one of my hobbies is fishing, And it's kind of like, so I know not to ask the questions to I have friends who are in the fishing industry who are some of the top anglers. I don't ask them like, hey, what lure should I use? Like, what's best? Because I know what they're going to say. They're going to be like, well, what's the wind like? What's this? What's the tide doing? What's the water clarity? This kind of stuff. So I just try to pick up concepts from them, but I also realize that, if I really wanted to be a good angler, it's going to take me a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, some days I go out and I get lucky, you know what I mean? And I run into it. But I've seen what the preparation that goes into people who are really good anglers, the preparation that goes into that. And so that's the same thing, I think, with anything, right? If you're going to be good at it, you're going to suck at it first. And I think one of the funniest things I heard with that was Joe Rogan talking about being a comedian. He was sitting around, I forget who he was talking to, but they were talking to another comedian. He's like, everybody sucks at first. Everybody. He's like, nobody goes up the first time and just, Chris D'Elia.
Yeah.
Nobody goes up the first time and absolutely crushes it. He's like, everybody has had the experience of standing on stage and had a quiet room while they tried desperately to get them to laugh. And the best they're getting is like a small chuckle. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that understanding that, and when you get into something, understanding it's going to take a long period of time, like just accept that. And that's okay. Like I think the problem is that in the industry, fitness industry creates the expectation, hey, it will be easy. You can do it in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. So then when it takes you much longer, you get disheartened and quit. So I'm telling everybody listening right now, it's okay that it's going to take a long time. Yeah. That's fine. That's normal. And it's normal to have setbacks. It's normal to feel frustrated. Right. And the one thing I'll leave you guys with is, I tell this to everybody, don't worry about motivation. Motivation does not need to enter in the equation. I hear people say this all the time. Well, I just wish I had your level of motivation. If you think I'm motivated every time I go in the gym, you're out of your mind. In fact, I'm probably more often not motivated than I am motivated. Now, overall, I enjoy training, but there are some days where my body feels like crap and I'm just like, I do not want to squat today. But I always look at it like brushing my teeth. I don't have to fire myself up to brush my teeth in the morning, right? Why? Well, because I know that if I don't put in the amount of work I need to on my teeth, they're going to look like crap and they're going to feel like crap and they're going to be unhealthy. It's the same thing with your nutrition and exercise. Motivation doesn't need to enter into it. If there's something you want, if there's a goal you want, there's a certain amount of work that's going to be required. And you need to put in that work, whether or not you're motivated or not. Jocko Willink calls having it discipline rather than motivation. Yeah. It's discipline. And I would go a step further in saying it's habits. So you just make it part of your day. You just decide, this is part of what I do. And so I was married previously before Holly. My ex-wife and I had a very different relationship. So I'll just put it this way. I didn't really do much cleaning. Okay. So when Holly and I first got together and she moved over, after about 3 weeks or 4 weeks of being here, she looked at me one day and she's like, honey, I love you. I don't know if you realize this, but I work too. So it would be nice if I didn't have to clean up your mess in addition to working, right? Honey. So I was just not somebody who was used to having the habit of cleaning, right? And so it's still, I'm not great at it. I'm never going to be like the most, because I'm not anal retentive like that. Like if I have a little bit of mess, it doesn't bother me. But what I had to start doing was every morning in the habit, okay, I get up, I empty the dishwasher, I load it with any dishes that are in the sink, I clean off the countertops, this and that. And now I'm not like motivated to do that in the morning. I don't like doing it, but I also understand, hey, happy wife, happy life, certain amount of work required for happy wife. So I don't need to be motivated. This is just part of discipline. So I look at it like, it's like cleaning your teeth or cleaning your counters. You just do it. Don't worry about motivation. But here's the funny thing. When you have discipline, the motivation comes after that.
It does, yeah. Jocko's, it's so good. I could talk to you for another couple hours. I can't. Holly, and I'm going to ask Holly about the dishes and how much hotter Layne looks after the dishes are done versus.
She's actually, it's funny. My wife is a very, very attractive woman. And I've
She's
actually had people
done.
say, yeah, I've
She's
actually had people say like,
done.
how did you swing that? Like, I tell this story all the time. I was on a plane one time. I don't get offended anymore. I was on a plane one time and we both got up to go to the bathroom. And, I think it's probably not that she's attractive because there's plenty of those, but it's also that she's very, very smart and hardworking. That's pretty rare. So we both get up to go to the bathroom and she walks in. The stewardess looks at me and she goes, like, "Are you with her?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Really?" I was like, "Damn." So, but I joke that I found the one super attractive woman who really likes nerds. So that's he actually would find me hotter discussing a scientific study than probably anything else out there.
Yeah, the sapio sapien for sure. Absolutely. I just love the way you guys, your energy together, the way you banter and love at each other and dissect topics. It's amazing. Tell my listeners what do you want to share with them? Because I know you've got so many great things. I want you to tell me what is the best thing that you found that will help.
So go buy all my stuff.
I agree.
I put a lot of free content out there, so I'll start with that. If you want to consume my free content, some of the best places to do that are Instagram. So on Instagram and YouTube are some of my best platforms, I think. I'm also on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, and you can find me at BioLayne at all those locations. And then my website is biolayne.com. If you're interested and on BioLayne.com, we do have a membership site where you can get workouts and premium content. We're actually also working on a research review that's going to be coming up. So if you would like to know more about research that's out there, but you can't read it for yourself, we're going to have that going to be coming out on the website. Probably the most exciting thing that we have out now is our new app, which is a nutrition coaching app. Holly and I and our friend Keith Crocker, who's a dietitian and one of our coaches as well, we designed the algorithm for this app. So basically, it is a nutrition coach, right? So you give it your information. It not only tells you what to do in terms of your nutrition, it will adjust it based on how you respond and what your goals are. And it's very good. It's been out less than a month, and we're almost at 10,000 subscriptions. So it's killing it. Carbon Diet Coach, and that's available on iOS and Android. So if you just search Carbon Diet Coach, you'll find it. Our website is joincarbon.com. And that is $9.99 a month. So if you've ever needed nutrition help, but you feel like you can't afford that, or you don't want to commit that kind of finances to it, or you don't feel comfortable checking in with a person, this is a great option for you guys. Also, my educational books, you can find at biolanestore.com. And that's where we have our books, Fat Loss Forever, which I think you said you have read. And I think what we're talking about today, a lot of this is covered extremely detailed in my book. That is my fat loss manifesto. It's what I'm so proud of. It's probably one of the most proudest things I've done. My wife and I also have a book together called The Reverse Dieting Guide. And then what else am I missing?
Allie's got the most incredible cookbook that you literally
yes, that's good.
Chocolate and drink wine.
So that's a great point. So my wife has several cookbooks out there. So if you're looking for ways to be able to stick to a little bit lower calories, but still not have to sacrifice a ton of taste, and you're a foodie like her, she has a couple of great recipe guides. One is called Food That Fits Your Macros, and then her most recent one is called the Contest Prep Recipe Guide. But it doesn't have to be used for contest prep. It can be for anybody. And those are great. So yeah, we try to put as much content out there. And then as far as if people feel like they need a little bit more support, they are interested in personal coaching. We don't do so much coaching anymore, but our team of coaches is excellent. We have between us, I think 6 bachelor's and 4 master's degrees in our coaches. Very, very good, very learned. So they're Team BioLayne, and you can follow them on Instagram as well as Team BioLayne. Great content they put up. And you can find their information on biolayne.com in the coaching tab. So if you feel like you need a little bit more help with that sort of thing, highly recommend that.
It's amazing. Thank you so much just for all the time you've not only here, but everything that you've done in, trying to find out for yourself and figuring this stuff out and helping us so that we can accelerate our learning curve and not have to go through all the pitfalls because of figuring it out. And I'll just say this. I love your heart. I love your persona. I love your energy. I just love what you guys are about. You're anomalies in my book. And
Thank you.
love that. And so thanks again, and look forward to seeing Holly and even having you back on the podcast.
Absolutely. You have to have her on the podcast.
I will. Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I always say that I made all the mistakes so you guys don't have to. So hopefully that information can help you guys out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.